And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Tom Vasel.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel, and today we're taking a look at a very big, very anticipated game called Feudum. Now, Feudum is a Euro game for sure, with resources and things, and you are trying to get the most of the king. You're trying to impress the king and just have, lots of farms and things like that to impress the king. But the box itself, this doesn't look like your typical Euro game. This almost has like a Yellow Submarine Beatles vibe to it. There's these people running from this monster and this wave with the ship, and the trees have almost like this cotton candy type aspect to it. Well, let me tell you right now that feeling doesn't really translate into the game. This game is a typical farming and move things around and improve your land type style of game. But the artwork certainly is pleasant to look at. But now let's take a look at the game. The first thing I want to make clear is do not use this video as a way to learn the game. I'm just going to give a very basic rules overview. There are a lot of different rules in this game. This is the land that you are trying to control and get points from. But more importantly, there are 6 guilds over here on the outside. You are going to control these guilds through various ways. Each player is going to have pawns, and when you put out a pawn, you're going to pick the side that you're going to place out there, and these sides might give you special abilities throughout the course of the game, but also they're going to give you ownership of the guilds, and when you control the guild, you'll be the guild master. And you can also have other spots in the guild that can get you points for controlling them at the end of each era. Also, controlling different regions on the board will give you will also count towards basically control points towards these 6 different guilds. The guilds are all interconnected to each other, so this guild here is connected to this one and that one over there, this one connected to the 2 next to it, and so on and so forth. You also have, the game is going to take place over 5 eras, and different things might happen, and that's going to be determined by these tiles there. Over the course of the game, some of these tiles will be taken off, and when you see a certain number of tiles of a new era, that era is going to begin. So when you see 4 tiles of era 2, you'll start. And so that's basically the time track of the game. There are many, many, many different ways to get points in this game, but most of the points are going to come from utilizing the guilds, controlling the guilds, and maybe having different spots that you have on the board, and also going on epic voyage and things like that. That seems like a lot of things going on, and it is. Each player, on each turn of the game, they have 11 different cards, and you are going to be picking 4 of these cards that you're going to be playing. And then in turn order, each player is going to play the cards. One of the cards lets you repeat another card, as long as that card has the ×2 at the top. If it doesn't have the ×2, then you can't repeat it. And if it doesn't have either one, then you can repeat it. In certain circumstances, it's slightly confusing. But the different cards are pretty basic on what they can do, most of them. Migrate basically lets you pay a food, a green cube, to add a new one of these guys to the board. So you can put out a new pawn if you want. And then there is movement. You can move your pawns on the board. Now, most of the time on the board, you can move via road. And you'll see that there's different ways to go from here to here would be one movement to move along there. But not everything is connected by road. You'll notice if you go over here to the ocean that some spots are connected by bubbles or connected by birds, and to do so you would need to have the proper transport vehicle, and your pawn would ride that vehicle over the waves perhaps to another spot. And if you then decide to go another way or use another transport, you would leave that there. Maybe somebody else can grab it as time comes by. Another card that you might have is the influence card. When you play an influence card, you're going to add an influence marker to the region that one of your pawns is at. The first person to go there becomes the ruler of that thing. You kind of control it. The next person to go there would go next to it, and that person would be serf. Now, if I place a third marker at a spot, then I become the ruler or the ruler can place a third one there just to show that they control it, but there can only ever be 2 colors at any particular area, 1 ruler and 1 serf. The improve action lets you pay a specific resource to upgrade a spot that you rule. So I might change this one here, upgrade a farm to a town, or upgrade a town to a feudum. And notice this feudum has a certain symbol on it, which again gives me influence in that guild. Now the problem is, if you build a feudum, feudums are great, they give you a lot of benefits, but when you're a feudum you also have to fight other players, because down here at the bottom of the board this shows as the game goes by you need to fight a certain number of times or you're going to lose points each round. And so the game has a card that's Conquer, and conquering is basically going to use your pawns against each other for some attacking. You can add some white cubes in if you're the attacker for extra points, and you can basically take control, take other people's pawns out, or you can fight the monster if it's on the board. Again, if this is confusing, it's because one of the things about this game is that all the different actions kind of work together. So to explain some actions, you have to explain other actions. Like, for example, you have a defend card, and the only time you won't use this card as an action, but you reveal it if you think someone's going to attack you, and it will give you a +1 on that attack. You also have an Explore card, which is going to allow you to go through this deck of cards and draw a couple of these in your hand. Some of these are endgame scoring, and some give you different benefits throughout the game. Like this one here gives you a bonus on attacking. Some of them let you do things for reduced cost. There's squares around the cubes to show that there's a reduced cost, which is a little bit weird, and you're going to probably have to look in the book to understand what all these mean. And some of them will give you endgame scoring if you can put a king seal on it at the end of the game. There's also 2 actions that allow you to, if you have a farm, to draw cubes from the bag. You put them next to the farm, and you can keep some of those cubes. But if you keep those cubes, you're going to get in trouble with the church. You can also tax to get shillings as long as you have a town. So both of these are ways to get more cubes in your area or to get more shillings. But the main action card of the game, at least I feel like it is the guild action. When you play this, you are going to be able to utilize one of the 6 guilds that's next to the board. So you can see there's 3 over here, and there's 3 over here. When you utilize a guild, you can either visit the guild and trade with the guild. Anybody can do that. Any player can trade with the guild. So you do the trade action, and there's going to be a different action for each guild. The person who is the guild master can push. They're going to be able to take resources from the guild and push them to the next guild, and it's a little bit different for each guild and how it works. The journeyman, that's the guy who's like the second in control of the guild, they can pull resources from the guild that normally pushes to them. So these 3 different actions are going to allow you to score points. Each time you do it, it's also going to give you points depending on how many goods you push. So for example, this farmer here, they're going to be pulling goods from farms that are sent here. They're then sending these guilds over here, the goods to the store here, where anybody can come in and buy them. And so, again, this may seem confusing on how all these work together, but the goods then are sent over to this area where you will be able to build ships and different vehicles. You can also build more influence markers. While over here, you can get influence markers. You're also able to buy monsters. Those influence markers can be used over here to get these royal seals, which will score you points. Royal seals will help you score those extra points at the end of the game, or they're turned into rosary beads. Rosary beads will help you as you farm, and those rosary beads will be sent all the way over here to the farm to allow more goods can be placed here. There's normally only 10 goods allowed to be placed here, but for each rosary bead that's placed on a chicken here, you can have more goods in that spot. Now all this might seem a bit confusing, and I understand that that's the way it's going to feel, but as you play the game, you will slowly learn. That's why I'm saying don't use this video as a rules reference. You will slowly see how all these things work together. They actually make a lot of sense. And honestly, that's pretty much all the overview I'm going to do from this for now, because there's a lot of other things going on in the game, and there's probably other videos that will do a better job explaining those, but you're going to be doing things. If you move twice in a turn, for example, you can place one of your pawns up here and go on an epic journey that will score you points. As you take these tiles here, you can also use these to put these next to an area, farm you control, to basically get more resources, and you can kind of exploit that area if you want to. There's a monster that you are able to recruit to go around and use that to attack other people. You're going to have some resources that you can put here into these barrels and turn that into wine, and wine and food are needed to pay off each of your pawns on the board. As I said before, the pawns, the sides that they are on, will give you special abilities. For example, when you're pulling resources from the bag, one of the pawns will let you look into the bag and just take the resources that you want, rather than just getting them randomly. So there's really quite a few other things going on in the game, and after the different epochs and whoever has the most points is the winner. So here's the thing about the components for this game. I really think I like the whimsical nature of the components. They're really nice. However, there's a lot of times in this game where they picked the beauty of the game, the form, over function. For example, these are starting spots, these pink cubes. When you put these discs on it, you can barely see that pink ring on it, and yet those are starting spots you need to put your people. You'll also notice that there are some spots here where you can pay to go on this river here. It costs 2 shillings, so they use a little S to show that there's 2 shillings. But as the game goes by, you also have to place cubes on certain spots in different eras, and there's little letters here, an S and a W, which you can barely see. And so I see the S there, but that S is also used on those shillings to put cubes down, and I found that a bit confusing. Not to mention, it's beautiful that there's this birds here that goes across, showing that you can fly using an airship to get from that spot to the other spot. But it's pretty hard to see, and it's very unclear at different points what's connected to what, especially over here where we have bubbles where you can go in an underground thing, and then just regular ship waves where you can use a boat. And so they made it look pretty, but just functionally difficult. The same with the cards, and I think I got a Kickstarter version, so I have like silvery cards and regular cards. But the cards, I already mentioned, having these squares around for discounts is weird, but just the iconography in general is very confusing, and you're going to be constantly having to look up each card until you have them all memorized. And even the board itself, the way each of the guilds activates, is not the easiest thing in the world. Now, I will give them props. They did give each player here basically a big chart that shows you what each of the guilds does when you trade there, when you pull there, when you push there, how many points you get, how things are scored on the board, and how each of your cards works. But you're still going to be looking at the rules. And here I want to complain a lot about the rules in general. I didn't think the rules were that difficult. But when I first played the game, I went through the rules, and they said, advanced rules appear in these nifty little scrolls. Great. So I said, all right, for the first game, I'm just going to play the basic game. So I get here and I skip this. This is a special ability. That's fine. The problem is many times the rules will refer to something that they'll talk about that's actually in the advanced rules. If you don't read all the advanced rules, you won't understand all the basic rules. And that I kind of had a problem with, especially when you have there's different pieces on the board. You're not sure if it's for the advanced game or the basic game. So you essentially need to read the entire rule set, and I have never actually played the base game because we had to play the advanced game just because it was a lot easier to figure out what the base game did, the advanced game did, since the rules were written well there. I'm not a huge fan of also these tiny cubes of various colors representing things. I know they represent food and wood and all that jazz, and I know that they had to be this way because you pulled them from a bag. I just wasn't a huge fan of them. I do like the monster. I do like the theming of this game. It looks cool. Sometimes it's weird, when the rules keep talking about these as pawns. These are cubes, not pawns, and yet people would get confused on that methodology. And when to put something in your bag and when to put something on the board. So the game looks cool, right? When you come and look at it, cool. But I think that they could have made it a lot easier to see and to do things on the board. And unfortunately, they chose this very beautiful board that's difficult to move the pieces on. When it comes to reviewing a game like this, I'm always very concerned for two reasons. One, this is a very popular Kickstarter game, and so there's a lot of fans of the game. And two, there's this general bias that Tom Vasel does not like heavy Euro games, when in fact there are several that I do like. But none of that's going to mean anything because I'm going to give this game a not so positive review. But I want to be clear that that not so positive review is coming mostly from my personal experience with the game. I'm not saying this is a bad game, although there are bad things about it in my opinion. I think the graphicness, the design, I already mentioned that, the form over function, I think that's a problem regardless of whether you like this or not. And I went and found the heaviest people who love Euro games the most to play this with, and they also complained about that form over functions. I think that's a problem with the game. But the game itself, there's a lot of really cool things about it. Like I said, it's kind of a hard game to explain, and I don't think, please, again, don't go by my explanation. It doesn't do justice on how all the guilds work together and how they flow into each other. That's really neat. I think that's the best, the coolest part of the game. I enjoyed that. I like how moving stuff from one to another and you're watching the other players, okay? Because this gives more interaction than your typical Euro game might do, because if Bob is moving the resources there and Rebecca is pulling resources from there, then maybe I need to change how I'm doing things on the board. But there are things that I did not enjoy about the game, so I thought I would go through those, and I have the rule book here with me just in case I want to make it clear. First of all, I found the game to be tremendously fiddly, and by fiddly I meant moving pieces around. The most extreme example of that for me was the ownership and control of the guilds. That's a very important thing in this game. And we learned after our first game to not let someone control a guild for too many epochs. They just run away with the game. They're worth a lot of points. But that side note. Controlling the guilds is based on what pawns you have on the board, what spots you control, and so every time somebody takes control of a new region or puts a new pawn on the board, we had to count everything up again and see who controlled the guilds that pawn or land affected. And I know some people out there might say, well, it's really fast and easy. I did not find it to be so, and it was something easy to forget. Someone put it out like, wait a minute. You put something out a turn ago. You control this guild now. And I just found that to be fiddly. And as much as I like the pulling stuff and pushing the cubes and the things around, there was this constant like, okay, wait a minute, I want to pull this. That action's different than this one in this way. The pull and the push are very similar, but there's some slight differences between them on how the goods move over. That mixed with, that form over function, slow this game down a lot, especially for new players. And it's weird because the board's so beautiful, and yet some things like the farms and things have these stark icons, and then you got to remember, okay, when I move this here, it does this. And so this rule book is fairly worn already because we were constantly going in saying, okay, how does that work? What does this do? Another thing I wasn't a fan of is I felt like the game felt like there was too many pieces added. I feel like a strong developer would have come in and said, we need to cut some of these extra pieces out. You can't do everything in this game, and that's fine. A game should never be something where you can do everything, But the epic journey part felt like a different part of the game almost. And while all these guilds are here, the rosary beads, and I guess there's some theming purpose here, but putting a rosary bead on a chicken doesn't make any thematic sense at all. And the different vehicles, I mean, there are there's airships, ships, and submersibles. No, there's 3 different vehicles, sorry. 3 different vehicles, but that still felt like too much. And then moving here in the ship, and then each side of the pawn doing something different, and it was constantly, oh, wait a minute, I want to do this action, but I can take this special action because I have this pawn face up. There was just mounds of different things going on, and it felt like some of that could have been cut to make a much more streamlined game. Again, the most interesting part of this game is those guilds. And that leads me to another problem I have with the game, is the card play. Pick 4 cards out of 11. That's great, except for that +2 nonsense that works on some cards, but not on other cards, but works on these cards. Some of the time, you can use the top part on some cards, the bottom part on other cards. If you have the pawn, that's a really cool mechanism, right? Take some cards, pick some actions to choose. I love that in games. This took that fun action and made it not as fun. And sure, it gives you the tough choices, which I appreciate, of I want to play all these cards, but I can only play 4. But I found that you were almost always, and maybe I'm a bad player, almost always picking the guild, because the guild card was actually 6 different actions. When you play the guild card, you can go to any of the 6 guilds. You can go there whether you are the guild master or journeyman, or you can just go to a guild and use it. And so you might want to use several of the guilds. So if you want to use 2, you play the guild master and double that times 2. And it just felt like that whole card system was a little more fiddly than it needed to be, and I keep coming back to that. Okay, now again, I don't want this to feel like I'm just elbow dropping this game. There are a lot of aspects of the game that I did enjoy. I think the economy of the game works pretty well. I like that the game gives you different focuses. I might want to be a farmer and produce crops and send them in. But the game does push you towards a few things. You have to be a guild master in at least 1 or 2 guilds, really, to do well in this game. You have to get points in various ways. But there is one thing I hate about the game, and that's the warfare, which is weird coming from me, right? Because I'm a guy who likes combat-oriented games, where games you get in other people's faces. But in this game, first of all, the warfare, boring, the actual combat itself. It's complex, really. It's like, okay, do you have a card? Are you attacking a pawn, or are you attacking a monster? And then, okay, so you get points for this, and if you use it was just this complex thing, which has some pretty strong repercussions. If you beat down someone in warfare in this game, you can take a lot of points away from them. And then, of course, you got to check guild ownership and all that stuff again. But where it became even more problematic is the game basically says you have to attack other people if you build one of these feudums. If you don't, the amount of points you lose is so great, I'm not sure you can recover from it. Feudums are great, they give you some bonuses, but to build when you're sitting there going, oh, I got to build this, and then everyone looks at you going, okay, now you're going to start attacking people. Because you have to. And I just found that whole attacking other people to please the king, it felt like a really tacked on addition to the game that I did not enjoy that at all. And I'm a person who likes attacking games and defense games and all that jazz. So that was my biggest detraction from the game. So yeah, this is pretty much a negative review, right? And I'm going to take a lot of heat in the comments, I'm sure. But I think a lot of you are going to love this game. I really do. I've already seen a lot of people being enthusiastic, and not everyone I played with had the same thoughts that I did on all these things that I'm saying. Some people didn't mind the attacking. There were some people like me who didn't enjoy it, but there were also people who did, and I think a lot of people are going to like the guild interaction is a really strong part of this game. And it may be so strong you like that to elevate this over other games. But I feel like there are more streamlined Euro games out there that give me this same kind of feeling. This one has some unique aspects to it, but the board and moving the pawns around and controlling things doesn't feel like it's as fun of a game as the guild interaction and moving the goods from this guild to this guild and building things and going over here and buying more influence markers. That part of the game is a fascinating, interesting idea, and some of you are going to love it. So that's my review of Feudum. Burn me now in the comments, but I wasn't a huge fan, but I think a lot of you will be. Dice Tower Judgment, just too fiddly for me.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
Shut the door.